you see REC on the screen.
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
That's the fastest business meeting I've ever seen. Well, let's see. How you doing, everybody? Good to see you all. It's good to be back here again. How many of you were here the last time I spoke? I came up here, I don't know how long ago it was. I love this place. I love this place. And as I said, excuse me, as I said last time, I speak every week somewhere around the state, mostly historical societies. And I must tell you, and I don't know what I said the last time, but when I started doing this a couple of years ago, I started hearing from historical societies, and they'd say, oh, yes, we'd love to have you come and talk about your book. And I said, okay. And I thought, gee, this is kind of neat. The historical societies, they're a perfect audience. And I thought, I'll do 10 or 12 historical societies, and I'll be done in the state. Well, I got to tell you, you are my 54th visit in 2.5 years, my 54th historical society, and it is a repeat. And I got to tell you, I have spoken everywhere, in all kinds of facilities, and this is one of the nicest. You are very, very blessed. I have spoken in one-room schoolhouses. I have spoken in Grange halls that I have no idea how they were still standing. I have spoken in old fire departments. I have spoken in Victorian homes. I've spoken in one-room schoolhouses. I've spoken in famous places. I've spoken in, what the heck was that? In Lansingburg, which is really North Troy. Their historical society is in Herman Melville's house. So that was kind of cool. I'll have to tell you, sometimes my mailbox is just full with speaking requests. And I got one not too long ago, and I think I was tired. And it was a very lovely email from a lady, and she said, oh, I've heard from other historical societies and they enjoyed you. Would you please come and visit our historical society? And here's an open date. And I guess I just kind of looked down at my calendar and I saw that I was open. So I sent her back a nice email saying, I'd be delighted to. Thank you for the invite. And then I got done and I thought, I wonder where I'm going. And I looked at the email, and honest to God, I had no idea where I was going. None. I could have been going to Buffalo. It was a place called Kings Ferry, New York. All right, I see you all nodding. I had never even heard of it. And I thought, oh brother, what did I get myself into? So I looked it up on a map, and I found out where it was. And for those that don't know, it's about 20 miles north of Ithaca on the east side of Cayuga Lake. If you go to Aurora, where Wells College is, it's 5 miles away from that. So I thought, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? So I drove out there, and it was the winter. And I'm driving out there, and I'm thinking, no one is coming to this night. It was a night. So I pull up in front of a one-room schoolhouse. It has the town snowplow with the light going on the front yard. And I thought, this is going to be good. And I walked in, and I could barely get the front door open. It was so full of people. There must have been 70 people in this little Kings Ferry Historical Society. And I deluded myself into thinking that I was extremely popular until I realized there was nothing else going on in Kings Ferry that night. And that's what I find happens a lot. I got a call about 6 months ago to come to the Smithville Flats Historical Society. I've never been to Smithville Flats. I go by the sign from Bainbridge over to Green and Whitney Point. I go by the sign all the time. I think this will be fun. So nobody comes. Well, I'll have a nice little ride. It was packed. It was absolutely packed, and we had a great night. And so again, I realized there's not a lot going on, and so that's what it was. But I always enjoy coming out, and I've done almost all of the Greek towns, all of the classic towns now. I've done the Manliuses, and I've done the Fabiuses, and I've done the Syracuses, and the Homers, and the Iliads, and everything. So it's always nice to come out here. The last time I came out here, I believe I spoke about my book, Great Graves of Upstate New York. which I told you was about 70 famous people that are buried in upstate New York. And I went around, it took a long time to travel around upstate, and I found who they were, and they're writers, and they're singers, and they're show business stars, and there's criminals, and there's folk heroes, and sports stars, and it's a wonderful book. This book has really sold thousands, and it's my bestseller. But I didn't know if anybody didn't get one the last time, so I did bring a few of those if anybody wanted it. But what I wanted to talk about tonight was the newest book that I have out. It's called Upstate New York, History Happened Here. And I'm going to tell you where the idea for this came from. I'm a radio DJ, 23 years now. I've been doing the mornings in Oneonta, which is where I came from tonight. And I'm really lucky in that, you know, as I get older, it's a little difficult crawling out of bed at 5:30 in the morning, but it's great at noon, because I hit the street at noon. And so I only live 2 blocks from the radio station, so when I get off the air at 12 noon, I go home. And I go upstairs, and I go into my writer's room, and I have 2 hours and 6 minutes all to myself to write. That's until the kids come storming through the door and my day is pretty much over. You all can understand that. Well, one day I was up there, and I had a serious writer's block. I could not think of, well, I was just gazing out the window like an idiot. Couldn't think of anything to do. And that was when I looked underneath my desk. And I saw underneath my desk the same thing that every writer has under their desk. And it's a box of stuff. All right? That's probably the unofficial name. A box of stuff. And there it was. And in that box are, because I'm also a newspaper columnist, I write a newspaper column, I also write travel articles for the Albany newspaper, I do a lot of writing. And I looked in there and I thought, what is in that box? Parts of a speech I never gave, parts of a column I never finished, things that people have given me, things I've ripped out of the 25-year-old magazine in the dentist waiting office that I thought was interesting. And I just threw it all in the box. I never looked at it. So I pulled my box of stuff out, and 2 hours later, I had this book. Upstate New York, History Happened Here. And this book is just this nice little read. It tells 25 stories of different people, places, and events that you may or may not have heard of that make upstate New York a place where history happened. Now, I go all over the state talking about this book, and it's interesting because as I go to different regions, for example, if I go to Lake Placid and I tell a story, they'll go, oh yeah, we know that up here, but people in Buffalo have never heard of it. If I go down the Hudson Valley, last week I was at Vassar, I spoke at Vassar College. Well, they knew the Hudson Valley stories, but they didn't know the Western New York stories. So it's very interesting. So the stories in here are just kind of a patchwork quilt of people, places, and things. Now the thing that makes it really neat is that, or I should say difficult on my part, is that when I speak to a historical society, by the very fact that you people walked through that door tonight, it tells me that you are already interested in history. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for me to try and spring things on you. Because you all know, for example, that the very first cavalry charge of the U.S. Army on horseback with bugles and sabers took place about 2 hours from where we are tonight. But see, you know that. You know that where the ice cream sundae was invented. About less than an hour from here. You know that though, right? Wow. So those are the kind of stories that I try to weave in here. And I'm not going to tell you. You can get the book and you can find out, right? But let me just give you a little bit of an idea that will illustrate this book to you, I think, the best. And that is how Big Chuck, my radio name, how Big Chuck sees upstate New York. I see it a little bit differently than most people. I see it through the eyes of a writer. I see it through the eyes of a radio broadcaster. I see it through the eyes of a newspaper man. I see it through the eyes of a radio broadcaster. I see it all a storyteller. So wherever I go, it drives my wife crazy. Absolutely drives her crazy. But wherever I go, I'm always the guy, and I know there's people in this room like this. I'm the one that reads every historical marker. I'm always the one asking all the questions. I see a lot of people smiling. I know there's a bunch of you in here in this room. Let me tell you an example. I would bet that if I said to all of you right now, let's all get up right now and go into our cars, and I'll meet you all in Vermont. I think I know how you're going to go. It's easy here. When I do this in Jamestown, New York, it's a little hard for my mind to figure out, but I know where you're going to go. You're going to go over here to 81, go to the thruway. You're going to Albany. You're going to jump over to Troy and take Route 7 in, and we'll all have a little party in Bennington, Vermont. That's how we're going to go to Vermont, and that's how I would go to Vermont too. Well, one time, that's not how you would go to Vermont? How would you go to Vermont?
Route 20.
Yeah.
Toll.
Route 20? Okay. No toll. Okay, for the reason of not paying a toll. All right, well, it's faster. Okay, well, in any case. The scenic way. Well, I'm the same way. I'm the guy that always takes 20 and 7 and 5. You'll never see me on 81 or 88 unless I have to get someplace fast. Otherwise, I'm always, my motto is the road best traveled is the road less traveled. And I'm a big advocate of that. So anyway, my wife and I are in Vermont. Or excuse me, we're in Albany one day. And we're on a vacation. Just a weekend. And I said, let's go to Vermont. She said, okay. So I got in the car, and I thought, well, we're going to go to Troy and go to Route 7, and we'll be in Vermont. Isn't that boring? I said, I don't want to do that. I said, let's go some other way. So she says, all right, let's do it. So we came out of Albany north on Route 9. A nice road. Up through Glens Falls, Fort Anne, Fort Edward, and then you swing around into the back door into Vermont. No tolls, for those of you that are counting. So anyway, we did this. And I haven't been on that road in decades. The very last town in New York. We're coming around the corner, and there it is. It says, welcome to Whitehall, New York, the birthplace of the American Navy. I thought, where's the water? Hey, honey, look, the birthplace of the American Navy. Can you imagine here in Whitehall? What about Annapolis? She looked at me and she said, we're stopping, aren't we? I said, yes, we are. So we stop. We go into downtown Whitehall, pretty little town. And she heads for a bookstore, and I head for the History Center. And there was a little lady in there. I said, ma'am, I said, the sign, it says, birthplace of the U.S. Navy. Can you tell me? And she did. And I'll tell it how she told it to me, only I'll make it 2 minutes. Basically, Revolutionary War, here they come. The Green Mountain Boys, Ethan Allen, Benedict Arnold, when he's still a good guy. They come into Whitehall, which was then Skenesboro, New York. They take it. They take the British garrison there. There's a ship there. They build 2 other ships. They hear the British Navy is up in the north part of Lake Champlain around Valcour Island. They say, let's go! Let's take them! They sail north. They are defeated by the British. But it delays the British. They've never seen anything like this. What is this? And it delays them enough so that they are diverted from what the British was going to do. And believe it or not, that certifies that as the first naval battle. And that's why Whitehall is the birthplace of the U.S. Navy. Now, I have to tell you, I was on vacation. I wasn't expecting to do any research for a book. So everything this woman is telling me, I'm writing down on the back of Wegmans receipts and dry cleaner receipts, and I'm gonna put this in a book. I'll put this in a book. She's right, I got this whole scrap of paper. So when I got done, I said, ma'am, is there a coffee shop or something where I can go and sit and put this all together? I said, I want to put this in a book. And it is one of the chapters in the book. She said, oh, no. She said, go right down there. And by the way, there is water in Whitehall. All right, you have Lake Champlain here. You have Hudson River here. There's a little tiny canal that goes right through and connects the two of them. That's the water in Whitehall. She said, no. Go down to the canal. Our community is just going to park there. And there's some really nice benches under the trees, and it'll be a nice place for you to write. And I said, okay, I will. So I go down there, and I sit on a beautiful sunny day, and I start to get my thoughts together. And I'm writing. I see something. There it is. It's hanging off the mountain, right across the bridge. I see some of you already shaking your heads. It's a castle. It looks just like a castle. I can reach out, bing, and touch it. It's right there. It's huge. It was the oddest looking thing I ever saw. Finally, my wife comes back. She said, you all set, Chuck? I said, honey, what does that look like up there to you? Oh my gosh, it looks like a castle. I said, let's go. So we crossed the little bridge, and like I always say, I've done 10,000 miles over all my books in upstate New York. And I know that if I'm on Church Lane, there's a church on here somewhere. If I'm on Cemetery Road, I'm going to find a cemetery or Schoolhouse Road. So I come across the bridge, and there's Mountaintop Road. I'm going up it. So we go up it. And my gosh, wow. As we crest the hill on the top of Mountaintop Road, there it is, a 3-story tall castle made out of big, huge limestone blocks with a big clock tower right in front of it. And the clock is keeping perfect time. And there's nobody, not a car, not a bird, nobody but my wife and I. And we get out, and when we park, you can look, and right down there's Whitehall. It's gorgeous. Looks like a little New England fishing village down there. And I look around, I have no clue what the story is here. Bang, 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 bang. We walk around back, and the back door is blowing open and closed. I said to my wife, let's go in. She said, I'll meet you in the car. So I walked in. Hello? Hello? And all of a sudden this woman pops right up in front of me. Little woman. Scared me out of my skin. I said, oh, what is this? And as she started to speak to me, I looked over her shoulder, and I could see there was a huge dining room. And on the tables were linen tablecloths and fresh flowers and silverware. And she had an apron on. And she said, this is Skene Manor. I said, can you tell me the story? And she did. And it was fascinating. Like I said, it's one of the chapters in the book. And again, she went on and on about it. I'll tell you in 2 minutes. Old days, we meet a guy who's a judge. He doesn't have any money, but he's got a lot of power. Marries a beautiful young bride who's loaded. He gets this property. He says, honey, I want to build you a castle up here. This was in the late 1700s. I wasn't there. He goes and he borrows this money, takes this money from her, and he builds this huge, has all this limestone from the quarries in the area, builds this huge first floor. He said, I got to put a second floor on here. Can I have some more money, honey? She says, okay. He builds a second floor. Could I have some more so I can put a third floor on for you, sweetheart? She says, of course. Gave him the money, puts the third floor on, and he steps back. He's a smart guy. I mean, this guy is a well-read guy, and he's trying to build her like a German castle you'd find on the Rhine. And he says, what's missing is a clock tower. But he's a little embarrassed to go back for more dough. So he says, honey, there's my gift to you. I wish I had some money to put a clock tower on, but I'm not going to ask you for it. And she said, wait a minute. And the story in Whitehall is that she said the following. Sweetheart, as long as I am on this side of the grass, you can have all the money you want. He takes the money, he puts the clock tower up, he finishes the castle, and she dies. It's a story very similar to Bolt Castle in that kind of a tragic, sad love token kind of a story. He grieves, he mourns, he stays there, he continues with his political life, he has banquets there, he has a lot of powerful people who visit them there, and then he dies. And then it's fuzzy what's happened to Skene Manor over the next 200 years. Some say at one time it was a tuberculosis hospital. That didn't work. Some say at another time it was a children's school. That didn't work. Some say it was an old folks home. That didn't work. People are very sure that in the 1950s it was a bar and a restaurant, because that would have been the most recent, and people remember that in real time. But eventually that didn't work, the inn, the bar, the restaurant, that didn't work, and it sat there deteriorating, hanging off the hill in Whitehall, New York, the birthplace of the U.S. Navy. This lady told me this story. She said, finally the town woke up and tried to save Skene Manor. And on the day that the wrecking ball was really on the way up Mountaintop Road, Whitehall stepped in and bought it for $100,000. And she took me over and she showed me this area where they had fundraising material. She said, oh look, she said, here's the bumper stickers we all had on our car, SOS, Save Our Skene Manor. She said, the whole town rallied and we bought it. And she said, and that's what you're seeing here tonight. We use it for community events. And someone's got for a wedding tonight. And that's what I'm doing. I'm setting up for the wedding. And I said, I am so proud of you for saving this magnificent building. My gosh, aren't we all? I mean, those of us that love history, it's wonderful. So I said to the lady, can I see the second floor? She said, well, we finished the first floor. The second floor is rough, but I'll take you up. We went upstairs. She turned the light on. I remember the first thing I said was, that is the ugliest wallpaper I have ever seen in my life. And she said that wallpaper was hung there by the judge himself. I said, wow. She showed me the clock. It was wonderful. And then she said, I really have to go and get back to my duties of setting up for the wedding. So she took me back to the front door, and like I always do, my kids always kid me about this. I'm always famous for saying, tell me one more story. And I said that to her. She said, okay. She turned around, and there were two big pocket doors. She slammed the pocket doors open, and we stepped in to a room maybe a third the size of this room. It was a beautiful, gleaming oak room. And she said, this is the judge's withdrawing room. after they would have the banquet, the judge and his men would come in here, they'd have brandy, they'd have cigars, and this is where the deals were made, while the women cleaned up. So you can see how things have changed over a couple of years. Maybe not here. So I was totally fascinated by her, and then I looked, and there, right there, was a bar with a big ornate mirror over it. And so as we were talking, I'm slowly walking down to the bar. And she's chattering on and on about Scheme Manor. And we get to the bar, it's just a little bit higher than that. And I remember, I put my arm like this on the bar, and she's right here, talking to me. And I'm totally entranced by this lady as she's telling me the story. And she tells me he never got over the death of his wife, so he buried her in the bar. And I jumped back for a minute, and I looked at that bar, and she said, yep, he buried her in a lead-lined vault in the bar. And I said, you're kidding me. Why would anybody do that? And she said, well, as long as I'm on this side of the grass, the money will keep coming. And that's the story in Whitehall. Now, the last time I told this story, I'm trying to flip through my mind, it was in Newark Valley, and a guy stood up and he said, you know what, in the 1950s, I had a trucking run from Albany to Vermont, and he said, I would stay at the Skeensboro when it was a tavern, late 1950s, early 1960s. And in those days, they actually had a coffin propped up in the bar with candles around it. And they made this big joke. And the lady said, yeah, in the 1950s, when this was a bar, the bartender went out and bought a fake hand and stuck it in the side of the bar with a piece of sewing thread around the finger, and every time somebody got too drunk, he'd do one of these things, and the guy would leave. And she also told me that if you go to your library or go to a library and you get a book called The 100 Most Haunted Places in New York State, Scheme Manor is one of them. And she told me that once a year, all of them, whoever they are, the ghost hunters, the ghost chasers, I think I met one here the last time I was here, they all rent this place out. And they go around with their green lights at night and their Geiger counters, and the clock goes backwards, and a woman in white walks across the top, and they just have a ball. So that is an example of how I see upstate New York. Can you ever drive through Whitehall again and see the sign that says birthplace of the U.S. Navy, and now you know the story, and you see the castle, and you go up there, and you know about the lady buried in the ball. And that's my whole thing. People always say, sometimes people say, everything you write about is upstate New York, and oh, everything is great. Well, look, everything is not great in upstate New York. But somebody else can write about that. All right? I know that upstate New York, when we have bad economy, we get the double hit. I know that upstate New York, people leave, and they don't come back. Don't even get me started on the winter. I know that, but there's a lot of rich history and vibrancy in upstate New York, and that's what I choose to talk about. And so that's one of the examples of how I see upstate New York. I'll tell you another little chapter that I have in here. This chapter that I have in here is, well, first of all, it goes all over the state. The birthplace of Jell-O, you've all been there, right? You've all been there? It's an hour from here? Okay. You may want to take a trip to the birthplace of Jell-O in Leroy, New York. When you go to Leroy, New York, a little bit more than an hour, just hop on the thruway, and this side of Rochester, drop down, and you're there. Leroy, New York, it's the birthplace of Jell-O. You ought to see the museum. You've been there? It's so fun.
It's cute.
It's cute. I take busloads of listeners. I'm a radio guy, so twice a year I take busloads of listeners out. 52 people. We go, I got one going out in 2 weeks. And we're always looking for something. And I read about the birthplace of Jell-O. I said, let's go there. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to bomb. It's so cute. You walk in there and it tells the story. Jell-O was invented in Leroy, and it tells the story of it. You walk through, and it has all the old cabinets and all the old boxes and lots of commercials, and there's things for the kids to do. And I tell about this because it's one of my chapters. And I said to the lady, tell me one more story. And she said, you should have been here the day Bill Cosby came here. And she ran the video. And I stood there and I watched. And here's this little dinky town in western New York, and Bill Cosby, who for 23 years was the spokesman for Jell-O, comes to the Jell-O Museum, and 10,000 people go to the museum to see him. And he gets up there and everybody's screaming and cheering. And I remember in the video, his first words are, you know, I was eating Jell-O before I got paid to eat it. He said, now I don't like it so much because I get paid to eat it, but I always liked it and always ate it. And the people loved it when he posed for pictures and all of that. It's just another thing that we have up here. You know, every town, and I would love to know your song. Every town in upstate New York has a song to sing. Every town does. Some do it, and some do not. A good example of this is down on Route 7 in Lower Otsego County. It's a little map dot called Unadilla. All right, you all know where Unadilla is. Well, if you were driving through Unadilla, New York, you'd be through there in 40 seconds. But you know what? They do have a song to sing. And they got it on their banners. Welcome to Unadilla, New York, the home of Boy Scout Troop Number 1. Now, it's not a lot of song, but it is a song. And they are the home of Boy Scout Troop Number 1. And they have it on their banners, and that is going to get me to stop and ask one more story. So, I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the story is in Fabius, although I'd love to know. I don't know if you sing your song or not, but I'll leave that for you guys to discuss in a meeting sometime. Now, in this book, there are stories about people that you've heard of. There are stories about people you have never heard of, and they are the best stories. And some places and some events. Now, I'll tell you this. My favorite chapter in here is chapter number 1. Ever since I was a kid, I have loved the Erie Canal. I love everything about the Erie Canal. When I was 10 years old, I asked for books on the Erie Canal. I've always been fascinated by it. The idea of 5,000 Italians and 5,000 Irishmen and a whole big group of Yankees, no computers, no electricity, pickaxes and shovels, and they want to dig a ditch from Albany to Buffalo. How do they do that? Well, I don't see a map of New York here, but in our mind's eye, we know where the Erie Canal is. It goes right across the middle of the state. And you know what? It does look like a straight line. It isn't, but it does look like a straight line. So they started up in the Rome area. They headed west. A little bit later, they started in Rome and headed east. And we all know the story of the marriage of the waters, the fresh water from the Great Lakes and salt water in New York City. The engineering marvel of its time. No electricity, no computers. How'd they do that? So here we see this large army of construction people moving through the wilderness, literally digging a ditch. Imagine what map-making sophistication was 200 years ago. It was a scout coming back and trying to describe something. So every once in a while they'd come to a hill that maybe wasn't there. They didn't know what to do, so maybe half of them started digging up, the other half started digging around. The easy way. I think it was the Italians that took the easy way. I'm not sure. I wasn't there. Death was the companion on the Erie Canal. Unbearable working conditions. How about Montezuma Swamp in Geneva? You gotta be kidding me. Today it's on 20, you know where that is, out by Geneva. The Montezuma Swamp is a beautiful natural preserve now. You can go, you can walk up on top and see the birds, and isn't everything nice? They had so many deaths of canal workers from malaria at the Montezuma Swamp. They said, stop. We'll come back in the winter. They came back in the winter, and it was the coldest winter on record. And many died of frostbite. Death was the companion on the Erie Canal. So they go on, and they go on, and they go on, and they get to the end. Right near the end. Right this side of Buffalo. They've almost done it. They are so close, they can see the casino lights in Canada. When what do they see? And I always imagine a movie scene. This would be the movie scene of like the lead construction, the Italian guy, right? And he like pushes the leaves aside, and there he sees it. An 80-foot tall, solid wall of limestone called the Niagara Escarpment. Where did that thing come from? They didn't know what to do. So they stopped to figure it out. They actually sent some of their canal people to England, where they've been doing canals for a long time. And they came back and they said, hey, the only way is up and over. And so they did it. I'm sure some of you have seen it. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. The 5 stair steps of Lockport is my first chapter. It's amazing. They actually built 5 locks, one on top of each other. And the boat, we all know what a lock is. Boat was indoor, closed, boat was indoor. 5 of them, up and over it went. Amazing. So, after all these years, and all of my enthusiasm for the Erie Canal, I've never been on it. So 2 years ago, for my 60th birthday, my wife and kids bought me a ride on the Erie Canal. And I was 10 years old again. We went to Herkimer. You ever been there? Gems along the Mohawk. That's where we took our ride. We go there that day, and I'm just standing there. I am ready. And the boat pulls up. The whole crowd gets on. I remember seeing there was a little boy in the back holding on to the American flag at the back of the boat, and I bumped him out of there so I could hold the flag. All the way down, I'm the one singing, "Low Bridge, everybody down!" And singing about the mule named Sal. My wife and kids were way up front with the hoods pulled over their heads. It was one of the best days of my life. It really was. Now, I want to put the Erie Canal in here. Like I told you, it is my first chapter. Where am I going to go? Have you ever, I'm sure you have, I know that many of you have, the canal ride, not the drive, Albany to Buffalo. It's fascinating. And there's a lot of canal towns. And every canal town has a footprint. Some of them, it's just a historical marker, maybe, or a buoy, or an old timber that was part of a lock. Others embrace it. It's a tourist attraction. Cafes and pubs and restaurants there, the marinas, markers, tours. So I had to come up with an Erie Canal town to put in my book. And I chose Lockport. So I got my 14-year-old, and I said, Joey was 13 then, I said, Joey, we're heading to Lockport. And we got up there. I'm absolutely beside myself. We parked and we walked down to where the lock is. My heart was racing in anticipation of seeing the 5 stair steps on Lockport. And there they were. They were as precise as the best contractor you could hire to do it. Perfectly lined up. Water still running down through it. The doors are all rotted away. The big barge canal that came later is next to it. But there's the 5 stair steps right there. It's amazing. No electricity, no computers. So we looked at it and I said to Joey, I said, we got to find somebody to tell us some stories about this. So I see one of the Smokey the Bear guys. I said, sir, I said, I'm going to be writing a book and I want to put a chapter in about the 5 stair steps here in Lockport. Can you tell us a few stories? He said, I'm off in 20 minutes. Wait for me. So we did. He came down. He told us the story of the 5 stair steps. And then we turned around and we started to walk. Now, the canal is not used anymore. I mean, it's used for pleasure craft or tourists, but there's no commerce on it anymore, anything like that. So it's a very placid mirror-like body of water. We're walking along and the guy's telling us the story. It's fascinating. And I remember looking in the canal and something didn't look right to me. And we all know what a train trestle is. The train goes across here and all the iron structures here, right? I said, sir, what's wrong here? He said, that is the upside down train trestle at Lockport. I said, wow. And there it is, this massive, right at the foot of the 5 stair steps, this massive train trestle. The train goes here and all of the infrastructure is hanging below it. He said, that's the only way it would work here. And I was confused because it looked right in the water. I thought, this is great. We're walking along, and he's telling his stories to me. And I interrupted him for a second. I said, sir, I said, I'm sorry, but I just have to tell you that this hill that we are walking in front of, something doesn't look right. He said, you're very perceptive. This hill is hollow. I said, what do you mean it's hollow? He said, that's where they did all of the construction and the excavation for the 5 stair steps. I said, wow. He said, you want to go in? I said, do I want to go in? He said, let's go. So we walked around, and here are 3 wooden stairs and a big round corrugated pipe with a little water dripping through it. And we step up the stairs. He's got a Smokey the Bear. He's got one of these great big key rings on. He pulls his key ring out. And we step inside. It was so cool. I remember my very first thought. My very first thought was, God, it's hot in here. It is hot in here. I said to Joey, I said, oh, it's so hot in here. He said, we've only been in here 30 seconds. Will you give it a break? I said, okay. We started to walk, and our guide started to tell us stories. And as we're walking along, he's got his flashlight. He says, look down there. And we look down there, and there's a door. It's about this long, about this high. I said, what's that? He said, that's the top of the first stair step. And that's where they went in and out to do their work. I said, wow. Man. Look over there. I said, what's that? Second door. Second stair step.